Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on Education, Finance, Taxation now will convene this public hearing, or this oversight hearing. The notice were given to the media on Tuesday, October 23rd. Second notice was on Friday, October 26th. And for the record, today is Wednesday, October 31st, and the time now is 9 o'clock. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following: the Department of Education, student safety. The conduct of this oversight hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. State your name for the record. We will now begin to hear testimonies, and we have currently present is Mr. Fernandez. We have several folks from GDOE that have signed up. I'm happy they didn't identify themselves as opposing the oversight. They left it blank because it's about student safety. It's not about anything else. Mr. Fernandez, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I just wanted to note for the record, our chairman, Mr. Mark Mendiola, is on his way and has testimony that we've already provided copies of to the committee, and he may, as he joins, he may want to have an opportunity to present. But I also have separate testimony on behalf of the department. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read through, and if I can summarize, I will do my best. In the package you received, you'll see a couple of attachments, and I'll reference what those are. We're present today, sir, to respond to your call for the hearing on student safety. Joining me, in addition to the board members who will join us today, are my management team, as well as administrators from our secondary schools, where some of these issues that we've seen recently have emerged. Although today is a school day and a parent-teacher conferences at middle school, I hope you recognize that it was important for us to all be here today to present information on the issues affecting school safety, and then to hear directly any comments or suggestions from the committee. These administrators, along with our teachers and staff, are on the front lines of this issue and have expressed to me their commitment to provide safe environments for all of our public school students and employees. The hearing is, I believe, is in response, and correct me if I'm wrong, to some of the recent issues that you referenced in your letter of October 12, 2018, and I did send you a response to those initial questions on October 26. I do apologize for some of the delay, except that we were in the process of reviewing, validating, and addressing other videos. These are the fight videos that began to surface after your letter, and then further impacted by the focus on sheltering for Super Typhoon U2. But in my response, I assured you that each of the individual incidents that you referenced had been handled immediately at the school level. And I also did request a possibility of delaying the hearing a little bit because, as you know, we do try to gather information regarding the perceptions of our stakeholders about the condition of safety on campus, and we thought it would also be a good idea, since the parent-teacher conferences are happening, for that safety to be for that school safety survey to be updated. So today and tomorrow at the middle schools and high schools, and then through the next couple of weeks electronically to our students and to our other stakeholders, our teachers and the other employees, gather an update on the safety issues that our stakeholders perceive at our school. So we don't have that available, but we're happy to make that available when we do compile the updated results. I think we did this at the end of not last school year, but the prior school year, to get a sense of the safety issues. But again, we'll provide an update when we're able to. As you know, we've been here a couple of times to address similar issues and concerns. So in 2015, there was a roundtable meeting in December. This is prior to you coming on board as senator and chair, to address a number of fight videos that were circulating in social media And then we were also here in May of 2018. I know the speaker is here as well in this concerns about bullying, drugs, and weapons on campus. So we did provide our testimony at that stage as well. And in those testimonies, in both of them, I believe we effectively described in great detail the policies, procedures, initiatives that we've put in place throughout the school system to encourage positive behavior, to guide administrators in determining how to address behavioral offenses with appropriate consequences. And then I think you'll recall there was a series of trainings that we provide to staff, special education staff, our school support staff, to basically provide support in terms of how do we address a whole range of safety issues on campus. So it's not just the fighting, but the bullying, how do we deal with substance abuse, alcohol on campus, and a whole range. How do we support students in crisis with emotional needs, psychological needs, and so forth. So in that May hearing, I know I just referenced that I included a copy of that testimony. So I didn't reiterate that, just as to help us recollect that there is a system in place, a number of different items in place and efforts in place in the school system to address these issues. And I think we are proactive in trying to curb bad behavior and address offenses quickly and effectively. And this enables us to, despite the fact that every now and then we see this flare-up of social media issues and incidents that come up, I do want to assure you that we're not acting in a knee-jerk fashion, but we have been deliberate in trying to establish a set of protective factors in the schools. So I do want to make a statement for the record so that we continue to be clear, and I've made them in the past couple of times I've been here. As we all know, the mission of the Department of Education is to educate our kids and to get them ready for college and career opportunities. We don't teach or condone bullying, use of drugs or alcohol, use of weapons, fighting and harming others. We don't teach that, we don't support it, and we actually take action to try to prevent it. These issues come into our schools from our communities, and we recognize that. And it's going to take our department, our mayors, our parents, the police department, the courts, DYA, the Attorney General, the Department of Behavioral Health, and a whole host of other partners if we're really trying to get to the root of these issues and to tackle them jointly. Because again, the same way we see videos in their schools, we see the same videos in the community, and it reflects the same challenges that we face. So, I do want you to know that we work as a single agency to try to fix these issues that bleed into our schools. And I think we've done our best to try to build that capacity. So as you're aware, we, over the past couple of years, we've taken our own initiative to build school-based behavioral health service capacity in our schools. We've broadened our substance abuse interventions. We continue to champion anti-bullying and anti-drug campaigns, created credit recovery opportunities for disconnected and failing students. But it's a difficult issue, and we can't do this alone. I want to put the recent videos into context. First of all, as of today, I'm aware of 4 recent videos that have surfaced and have taken place this school year. One was at JFK, the other at Teason High School, and there are 2 videos that surfaced from Simon Sanchez High School. And I know a lot of those went around, and you may have seen them, and they were in the news as well. As far as others that may have surfaced, some of those that, as we investigate them, appear to be older videos, year, 2 years, 3 years ago, that even though they are not in the current school year, the administrators are tasked with just ensuring that those matters are identified and have been addressed, even if it's those prior years. But it's important for us to do that so we understand, if these are valid, immediate issues, and then going in and addressing the students. We have about 29,680 students this year, and about 18,000 of these are in middle and high schools. When we look at the data, violent offenders make up only less than 3% of students in middle school and just 1% of our high school population this year. If you look on an annual basis over the last 2 years, that percentage has tended to be around 9 to 10% in middle school who are disciplined for offenses that we consider to be violent offenses. Those are, typically involve assaults, rioting, fighting. And then in the high schools, less than, probably around 3%, or less than 4% in high school. And the point I want to reiterate is that the majority of our kids are not committing these acts of violence. The students in the videos are a small minority, and even though we recognize that their impact is disproportionately disruptive and concerning. We take each of these incidents seriously, and our school administrators are well versed in dealing directly with those incidents with regard to our rules and procedures that are in place for addressing discipline. Let me just make a note that when the videos come out, and I know this might be a discussion, obviously we're dealing with a world that social media is very prevalent. And so when these videos start to circulate, even though they're very disturbing to see, it does assist our administrators in conducting their investigations and in identifying not just the combatants that might be involved, but also the circumstances, any other instigators or parties to the fight that may be encouraging or contributing to the fight. And those videos are very powerful tools in order for us to make sure that all those students are addressed, and our administrators know that's their expectation. Again, for the most part, in our past surveys of student perception, I think our stakeholders have tended to report that they feel safe on campus despite the incidents. But as I mentioned, we're trying to update that information based on the latest videos and the latest sentiments of our parents and employees and our students. I do want to state for the record again, and this is something I mentioned to you, Mr. Chairman, that even though we know our mission is to get our kids to graduation, there comes a time when we have to draw a hard line against acts that are just not tolerable. And in board policy and in law, there are such things that we already recognize as not being acceptable at any level, no matter what the circumstance. So for instance, firearms on campus, there is no discussion about extenuating circumstances, mitigating circumstances. If you bring a firearm onto campus, you're automatically, from our standpoint, you're not allowed to be back on campus. From the standpoint of law enforcement, it's a crime, right? So I understand it's a third-degree felony to possess a firearm on campus. It's not tolerable, it's not acceptable, and this is the message I communicated to our administrators as we sat down recently to discuss this hearing and the things we were seeing on video. And as such, I have informed them that I am inclined to support the recommendations of the administrators should they wish to suspend or to expel violent offenders from our school campuses. At this time, a school administrator's recommendation to expel a student is not just a unilateral decision. It goes to a disciplinary advisory committee comprised of administrators, teachers, students, and representatives from the central office. And in that process, there's an opportunity for the students to be heard, and then for a recommendation to be made from that committee. That committee makes that recommendation to the superintendent, and as a superintendent, I then decide on whether or not to follow through with the expulsion of that student. There is an opportunity for the parent to come and appeal, or for that student to appeal that decision. And so I think in that process, we do have an opportunity to understand the circumstances, give some due process to the student before he makes such a significant decision. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that serious offenses demand serious consequences. And I have not been hesitant over the last year and a half to take those actions and to meet with those parents who come in and the students who come in and basically talk to them and say, look, this is a serious offense. You've got to deal with the consequences, and we need to talk about your next steps, whether it's going to adult high school, whether you want to apply for consideration at JP Torres, for other things, but you've got to start thinking about your future. But through this process, we have to draw the line somewhere so that we show not just the students who are involved, but all the students back at school. Then you've heard from the students and say, well, they're just going to be back, right? They're going to go be suspended, they're going to have fun at home, they're going to be back. We've got to combat that issue where even the students who are not involved may believe that the discipline is not appropriate, is not commensurate to the offense. So the videos help us, and I've seen videos that are very violent, subject our students to significant harm, and it doesn't cross my mind twice when I mete out a significant issue a consequence like expulsion if we follow that process and we have an opportunity to hear from that student and then render that decision. I say this because, and I say this for the community and for our educators, when we're not talking about firearms or violent offenses, this notion of progressive discipline is what we tend to implement at the schools. And that makes sense because we're dealing with children. So at elementary, middle, and then as you get into high school, we understand that students make mistakes. And we understand that it's our responsibility to try to help get them on a positive path. So when you make a first mistake, you don't get expelled, right? And on any other offense, you make a mistake, we do our best for the teacher. We'll talk to the student. If necessary, we bring the parents in. We may put the student on work detail, but the more the offenses come, the more severe the consequences come. And we are very tough on some of our administrators and teachers to try to make sure you apply those interventions. Let's not give up on a student because we haven't been able to reach the parent or because the student has made more than one mistake. But at the same time, we're doing a balancing act of ensuring a student's right to education, but balancing the safety of that student and all the others. So something that we're going to struggle with, but I've issued my directive to the administrators to feel free to leverage that expulsion authority, the long-term suspension authority, to get the attention of these students, these minority of students who are causing this major disruption on campus. At this point, it's my formal guidance that's going to be needed to ensure that our administrators understand that they're not going to be required to give everybody a 10th, 11th, 12th chance. If you are violent on campus, we need to have a safe campus. And then I want to work with our board to really capture this in a more thoughtful and long-term policy. Because as you know, even though we can see something that looks violent, when it comes down to determining in writing what those offenses are, we need to be very thoughtful and make sure we're clear so that beyond this year and for the next years that policy can be clear and remain in place, and people have an opportunity to comment on that. I do recognize that more liberal usage of this expulsion authority will raise concern about high school students not completing their high school and not getting to graduation. And of course, that's a concern to all of us. And again, it's a balancing act in these compelling interests of the right to education and the right to safety. And so the position I'm taking right now is that we need to draw the line somewhere and have this discussion right up front about what's tolerable and what's unacceptable on campus. I do think that now with the compulsory age lifted, but even before when the compulsory age was already in place, if you were expelled from school but you are within that compulsory age range where you are required to go to school, our job is to provide an alternative education option. Now, in the past, some people might have thought of that as PACE, JP Torres. Really, it's a really undefined set up an option for the students. So in some cases, it may be sending lessons home, and you are required to do your lessons at home and submit them back and work that out. We do have an MOU of DYA to utilize the community centers. So if you are a middle school student who happened to be expelled for the rest of the school year, that you would still be provided your education, your lessons, but you would be doing it at the community centers that DYA currently operates. And so that's one of the areas that we would like to work on. I do have students who face expulsion who say, well, can you just send me to JP Torres? And I said, well, you're not entitled to go there. But let me put it this way. We do want you to succeed. You're too violent to be back on our campuses. So if you want to succeed, I'm going to contact JP Torres, and I'm going to let them know that you're going to apply to JP Torres, and you're going to go to that interview process that we have in place at JP Torres, because the focus there is about getting you on track to graduate. But you're not guaranteed a spot there. I mean, you really have to show commitment, and if you show that commitment, they will accept you. But if you don't meet that commitment, you lose that second chance. So I think as we move forward, we're going to look at JP Torres and however we expand that opportunity as more of a second chance that you have to earn, not a second chance that you're entitled to. And that's something that I think we've been struggling with, because it used to be that if you're bad, you then get sent. And then we're still struggling to figure out how do we cure those. We do need, especially in high school, we need you to be committed to fulfilling your own graduation goals. It can't be that it's a one-sided, that we're telling you to go to school and you have to go to school, but we're going to offer you an opportunity, but you have to also be part of that process. So we can work on that as we go forward, but I think that's really worked, where we've told students, you're not entitled to this automatically. You got to go earn this chance to finish your diploma, and I think that's helped in those instances where those students are able to proceed in that manner. We have this discussion, and I know everyone understands this. In a time of austerity, when we're facing the federal tax cut impact, the $17 million in reduction from last fiscal year appropriation to this year. And we can have a discussion about what the resources are needed to assure safety. We do need to ensure sufficient staff on campus, and as I've gone forward in my tenure, I've tried to rapidly fill the vacancies and so forth that we see on for school aides in particular, and we've done our best. But the Budget Act does contain provisions that we're still sorting through. I mean, one of them was the hiring freeze. So we understand the Attorney General has opined on that, and we now are looking at how we move forward in light of the AG's opinion. Obviously, even if the AG has said that the hiring freeze is inorganic, there's still going to be some type of freeze, or there's going to be a much more hesitation to fill all of these positions, given the fact that we still have to make cuts to the budget. So, but again, we're looking at that, and our attempts to fill positions will be school-based once we move forward. But we did receive that opinion, and I think we need to just sort through that. The freeze on promotions is something that I've raised before. As you know, the administrative provisions also freeze promotions. So even if we go forth and open up school aid positions, the way the law reads in my interpretation is that our current employees, I think it's within the government of Guam, can't apply for that position if it actually ends up being a promotion. So I think that's one thing I'm very hesitant about, because as you know, we have so many school aides who've been waiting for this opportunity to move up into a higher position and a higher level of responsibility. But the administrative provisions of the Budget Act put a freeze on promotions, and my interpretation of that is, if I open a position because we interpret the hiring freeze to allow us to hire outside of teaching positions, let's say we can hire and to fill those school vacancies, am I not allowed to have a school aide one apply for a school aide two position, someone who's been part of the department and who's had the experience working in our schools? Are we prevented from doing that? I think that's something I had raised with our appropriations chair to say, can we find a way to correct that so that our long-standing employees who have the experience can actually apply for those positions, as well as others who want to compete to come in and support our schools. I know we're in a tough situation, but there's also a freeze on reclassifications and increments. And so even though we understand the budgetary need for that, there was a discussion about, well, why, we have staff, and, with a collective bargaining agreement, we do require teachers to, be present during passing time. But, we see situations on video, and some people ask me, well, why didn't that teacher intervene, or how come the staff didn't intervene? And the truth of the matter is, so many times our employees do intervene, right? I mean, it's not part of their job description, but for the sake of student safety, they're intervening. And sometimes they get hurt, sometimes they get injured as part of that. And we have ways, of course, through workers' comp and other ways to try to compensate that for them. But the truth is, it's not in their job description. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that, we've asked for flexibility to try to address this, is at the same time as we're trying to get all of our employees to just be a part of keeping our students safe, the morale on our campuses is low, right? They're saying, well, when are we going to get that increment that we depended on? And what about the reclassification? I just finished my master's, and I was hoping that I would see some raise so I can pay back the expenses I put into that. It's a morale issue. So every time I ask someone to, hey, can you just be there and be present and do what you can to keep the students safe, there is in the back of my mind this sense that we're also telling them, hey, there's nothing else, there's no way we're going to let you be able to take advantage of things that you are entitled to or have been entitled to in the past, as a basic way of recognizing your length of service and your continued education. So one of the things I just wanted to raise so we can work on ways to fix that or try to address that. At the same time, we ask our teachers and our staff to do more than just stand and observe when students fight. And I think and I'm not saying this because that's what they do. I know personally, administrators and staff who've been hurt trying to intervene, and I think you've seen a video where a staff was attacked as part of that fight. So it's something that we have to continue to work on, and I ask you for that support. I do want to mention that we do have a school resource officer program. You might ask, about the status of that. The status of that is that we are able to afford 6 SROs, and that's, it's very expensive in the way in which it's currently designed. And so I've worked with the judiciary, and I've said this is just really hard to sustain. Even though we appreciate law enforcement on campus, we can't afford it in this manner. And of course, every time we train somebody up in a marshal position or opens up at the court, I mean, it's a stepping stone, and we recognize that. So it's there. It's good while we have it, but we're looking forward to figuring out how we can proceed to the next phase of security on campus. So there are two things that are on the table. I might have mentioned this before. One is to try to build around our student attendance officer positions, to build them and to provide the necessary training and support so that they can possibly fill the SRO responsibilities and roles. Many of them actually do those responsibilities. Over the time, we've asked them to step in and assist and support. And we've had this debate back at the board, and it was just recently where we said, look, we do have to recognize that we call on our student attendance officers to help when we have incidents on campus. And so we just recently reviewed what the expectations are, and we did pass, the board did approve creation of school resource officer positions that would enable them to apply if they meet the qualifications, of course. But also we could build around internal school resource officer positions and sustain those positions, for the long term. So, one effort is to build internal capacity around things that the assets we already have. The second is, again, I think I mentioned this to you, Mr. Chair, with the Guam Police Department, trying to see if we can, as they determine the design of their reserve program, figure out if we can have their reserve officers put in the hours at our schools and somehow, cover the stipend costs if that's what we need to do. That would be more cost effective than the current SRO program with the judiciary, but also, do a dual purpose of actually having police officers on campus. So that's really a conversation we've started. We haven't really advanced it. I mean, right now there's a challenge finding reserve officers who are able to put those kinds of hours in. But we did start that conversation with the chief and with the leadership there to see whether that would be an option going forward. And then I think that's all I have to say. I just, again, we're working hard on all fronts to try to ensure we have the resources to dedicate to our schools. That doesn't just include the budget. We are working hard on the U.S. DOE high-risk situation, because we realize if we get off of special conditions, that's $3 million more that comes back to the department. So the latest update there is that we do have, we've been in the process of requesting formal reconsideration. They are working on finalizing a what's called a reconsideration evaluation plan, and this is a plan that would basically identify what was supposed to be done, ask us to provide evidence, and set a timeline for their visit to either do a virtual evaluation or to be on site. And we're going to work with them to try to finalize something, hopefully in December or by January. And that we hope to be the roadmap to get off of high risk and off the special conditions. So that's something we can be happy to discuss when we get to that point of a more concrete plan. But they've been committed and they've had that conversation. And so we're looking, again, finalizing a roadmap off of high risk by December or January. So finally, thank you again for your concern for student safety. I do want to assure you that it's the priority of everyone in the department. But again, we can't do this alone, so we look forward to that discussion, that collaboration, and any ideas or suggestions that you believe would be helpful in keeping all of our students safe in the Guam Department of Education. Thank you, Situs Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. I'd like to also recognize that the presence of the Speaker, Senator Terlaje, and Senator Will Castro. And we also have one more individual that showed up that wants to testify, oral testimony. That's Mr. Mendiola, the chairman. Please come forward. And Mr. Fernandez, right after he speaks, because I don't have all your principals signed up. I know they're all here. A lot of them are here. If you can identify who they are. Right after Mr. Mendiola speaks. Okay? Mr. Mendiola?
Good morning, Honorable Senator Situs Masi, for the opportunity to be here. I apologize. I came in at 9:01 and the proceeding already started. I was Agustin Johnson with my son here, who was a parent-teacher conference. I wasn't able to meet with this teacher because I had to rush down here. I earlier made a request to the superintendent to ask if we could move the hearing time where we can get more parents and more folks involved in this proceeding on this oversight with GDOE. Unfortunately, because of the storm and the parent-teacher conference is being canceled, we shifted it to this date. So I know it was a major request, but my child's education is very important, and I wanted to be there for him, and that's the reason why I was late. So 1 minute late. Also, I wanted to mention that my colleague on the board asked me to mention to you folks, Mr. James Guåhan, who is the chair of the safety committee. Unfortunately, he's not here at this time because of his medical condition that requires him to do dialysis. He also made a request that this proceeding be held at a later time. But nevertheless, sir, we are here to support the superintendent with respect to the issues that I know that you have shared with us as board members as well regarding safety in the Department of Education. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to meet with our school administrators along with the superintendent in one of our work sessions. And, I know that the Department of Education is doing its best considering the resources that is given to the Department of Education. The three pillars that our board has maintained, at least since I've been on the Board of Education, was safety, facilities, and ensuring that our curriculum is sound so that we can prepare our children for success in their futures. So with that today, honorable speakers, I'm here in support of the superintendent and to basically come up and work with you folks on solutions to some of the challenges faced with the Department of Education. So I'll read my testimony into the record, and then I would conclude, and then we may answer any questions you may have. Dear Senator San Agustin, Hafaday, I'm here on behalf of the Guam Education Board to present my testimony regarding the issues of student safety. It is my understanding that this hearing is in response to school fights being circulated on social media that have been reported on by our traditional media partners in recent weeks. Let me say, for the most part, our schools are safe places for our students. But we recognize that these acts of a few, especially when circulated in social media in a very visible way, do not do much to disrupt our campuses and paint our school system in a negative manner. It is my hope that you are calling this oversight hearing to determine how the legislature can assist us as we work on improving our school environments. We met with our superintendent and secondary school administrators to review recent events, reports on school responses, and determine how to strengthen our responses to issues threatening school safety. We are aware of 4 or 5 videos that have taken place recently in our schools. School administrators have dealt quickly with these incidents, utilizing our well-established disciplinary policies and procedures to distribute consequences and working with parents and law enforcement to reinforce our actions. Some of the consequences will range as high as expulsion, and in some cases, and the superintendent has indicated to us that he is inclined to support those requests in order to remove dangerous students from campus. Unfortunately, these actions come after students have been hurt, but the message we want to send today is that there is no tolerance for violence on any of our campuses. We do face several challenges that we need to confront. First of all, we remind you that school violence is not something that is taught or promoted in our schools. It comes from outside of our schools, from out in the community. In fact, we know that one of the incidents that you may have seen on video stem from an actual violence that took place in the village between 2 groups of people. When you call us in for an oversight hearing without the presence of our village mayors, the Guam Police Department, the Judiciary, the Department of Behavioral Wellness, Health and Wellness, and other partners, it is as if the Guam Department of Education alone is supposed to solve the issues of violence between young people. This cannot be the case. We need our community as a whole to help deal with these issues that come into our schools and endanger our students. Second, while we do not have the support on campus to help prevent incidents such as the one seen in the videos, we are in an environment of scarce resources. As you are aware, having been the former Education Board Chairman, we come to the legislature every year asking for $320 million, which we believe is needed to address the mandate set forth in the Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Education Act. You also know that we do not get anywhere close to that amount in our final budget. And even then, We have to closely monitor the release of cash to make sure that we get what we need to operate. On top of that, in 2018, we have had to deal with the federal tax cuts and the repeal of local sales tax that was supposed to insulate the department from further cuts. In FY 2019 alone, we were asked to reduce spending by $17 million compared to the amount appropriated in FY 2018. As part of those cuts, we have to factor in the legislature's freeze on hiring, reclassification, increments, promotions, which greatly hurt employee morale, at a time when we need everyone to pitch in and help prevent further violence. We recently submitted a supplemental budget request to restore $15 million to our FY 2019 budget to support key priorities, but also to relax the administrative provisions so that we can fill vacancies and ensure adequate staffing and support through our schools. The proposal was sent to the Education Committee as a board resolution and also draft legislation for your consideration and support. In addition, we earlier sent you legislation to assist GDOE in raising revenues in other ways, such as leasing out the space in PD to help offset our needs. We ask you to please prioritize these bills. Third, we have discussed strengthening our policies to reflect our lack of tolerance for violent acts on campus. Our board policies already require expulsion of students who bring firearms on campus, drawing a bright line for what we can expect on campus and what we cannot. For most other acts, we tend to use progressive discipline to correct student behavior, and we work over a period of time to give students numerous chances to change their habits. However, when it comes to acts of violence, progressive discipline is not the answer. We need the danger removed from our campus. In the next few weeks, we plan to work with the superintendent and other school stakeholders to strengthen our policies and procedures and to send a strong message to the actual or potential offenders. Our board is committed to ensuring the necessary changes in policy needed to support the superintendent and our principals. Overall, education is the key to solving many of our community's ills, and for every child who comes through our doors, our commitment is to try to overcome the challenges that face every child and enable them to succeed in our schools academically and socially. We recognize that that is part of our mission. At the same time, we have to protect our kids from the dangerous acts of others. The right to education does not automatically override the right for students and employees to be safe in our schools. We thank you for your attention on this matter. I am here to listen to your ideas and any recommendations you may have may assist us. This concludes my written testimony, but I would just like to add from my perspective. My wife is a teacher in the public school system. She witnessed a fight going on a couple years ago, got involved and separated the kids. Unfortunately, she was thrown on the ground, she rolled down the hill, and she broke her knee. This is a teacher. This is a teacher. And she could have taken workman's comp to go back and stay out of the classroom, but she decided she needed to be in the classroom and went back. Once she went back into the classroom, workman's comp stopped. It ceased. And to this very day, she still has that injury on her knee, but she still goes to school every day. A lot of our staff, a lot of our employees are put in harm's way when they go to school. And these teachers are committed to ensuring that our kids are safe. And when we look at certain things that's occurring with respect to our financial resources and how it's divvied out and how we're asking our teachers to do more, we're asking our school aides to do more, we've been trying our best as a board to come and work with the legislature to provide solutions to some of the challenges that we are faced with. And let me just reassure you that your concerns is our concerns. I know I'm appointed to the board. I know we have elected members on the board, and we get everything that you possibly get, and sometimes you do share that with us. But I firmly believe that the superintendent and his management team are handling these cases case by case, and these are incidences that I know that the department is taking the appropriate administrative actions. The day-to-day operations is left to the superintendent, but let me reassure you that as these things come up, and with the advent of technology and everything that gets circulated in social media, there was even videos that circulated from a couple years ago that was already addressed. But yet it rekindles that fire and that flame, and I know that the Department of Education, I know that the board, we're going to continue to do what is necessary to update our policies so that we give the superintendent and the administrative team the necessary support to provide the appropriate disciplinary action within the department. I know that there was also another case of an 18-year-old that sexually abused a minor, a 14-year-old. And that was out there. Recently, the law was passed where we have to go ahead and allow students up to the age of 18 to attend school. This is an adult. We have policies in place that employees, even if you're a school aide that's 18 years old or 1-to-1 aide, you cannot have a relationship with a minor. You're employed by the department. But when it becomes a student, I mean, what is the remedy that we have so of course they go through the system. I bring these things up because we understand that there's gaps. We understand that there's gaps. But we have come to the legislature. We were called, I remember when they had a mass shooting. We came down here and there was other law enforcement people around the table. And I was hoping that some things would come positive out of that. And it did for the department. Now when you go into our school campus, and I believe it was your recommendation to have the ID badges and to have people at the gate to check them in. I would reassure you that if you do that, we made the changes. We stood up to the challenge to do that. We came to the legislature with a supplemental budget request asking for support with our school resource officers. I know you guys have visited our schools, and you know, there's a tremendous amount of activity going in our schools. We've invited you folks to our board meetings. Now we are on Facebook. We're transparent as much as possible when it comes to policy decision making at the Department of Education. So I'm really here to continue the dialogue, to continue to work with you, Mr. Chairman, on possible solutions and how we can strengthen the law, perhaps, and how we deal with some of these more violent crimes so that it's not left to the winds of change, whether, and that the department can then create policies that put more teeth to the law, and so that our administrators, our teachers, and everybody that comes on campus feels safe. I know that there's a lot of parents out there. During the parent-teacher conference, I filled out a survey. Do I feel that my child is safe in school? I turned to my child and I asked him those questions. Do you feel safe in your school? I asked those 6 questions or 5 questions that were asked, and I asked my child. And I just feel, as the parent representative on the board, and that's one of the things that a lot of these activities that are going on, there was a riot at a bus stop, and it eventually comes into the school. Then it becomes a school problem. And we had a conversation with our mayor last night at our mayor representative. We even asked our Island Governing Board of Students to help us. So they submitted, they crafted some of their thoughts from all the different high schools as to how they feel that they can help solve some of the problems and challenges as it pertains to the violences in their, violence in their high schools. So I know that the department is working. I know that we're doing our best. And everybody's always going to revert back, you know, it's the resources, and it actually truly is. And I don't envy your positions. Oftentimes out in the media, we're saying, hey, you board members and you Department of Superintendent, you shouldn't be involved in tax policy. That's not your responsibility. Well, I look at it as, yes, it is. I'm a tax-paying citizen, and I want to know where my tax dollars are going, and I want to ensure that we get quality education for our kids. And I understand that the pie has to be cut at the end of the day. But if they're going to hold us to, when I say they, the people of Guam are going to hold us to the 14 points of providing an adequate education, and there's no funding to support that type of legislation, and then get caught out at the same time, why aren't we generating revenue to help supplement some of the activities going on in the Department of Education? Those are the real questions that we get asked as board members. And I'm pretty sure you get the same questions out there. I just want to figure out how we can best solve this together, and I'm here to listen. I know that the Department of Education, I know that there'll probably be more people here today, And I think we can continue this discussion because safety is really important for everybody in the community. So with that, I'll conclude my testimony. I have a written testimony that I will submit, ready for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mendiola. I just want to make it very clear, and I think Mr. Fernandez got the message. This oversight is on the superintendent and his operation. We have to understand. It's not about you bringing all your parents down here, bring all your principals. We wanted to know what's going on. Okay? That's the issue. So, Mr. Mendiola, I understand.
May I respond?
No, you don't need to respond.
I think that requires a response.
No, this is not your hearing. Mr. Mendiola, we're going to continue on, okay? And then you can comment when we ask for your comment. But that was what I spoke to Mr. Fernandez about, his staff, and that's where we're going to stand, okay?
Sir, with all due respect, I think this is the people of Guam's public hearing, sir.
Mr. Mendiola?
This is the people of Guam's public hearing.
Hold off on your response. You get your response, okay?
I would like to respond to that comment, sir. I think that's...
Then go ahead.
So, sir, you're saying that this is an oversight for the Department of Education. He's the operation side of it.
That's what we want to know.
Public law allows the governing board to supervise the superintendent. We draft the policies. We come up with the policies where they're implemented. We supervise them. We should be well aware and we should be involved in some of the issues as pertaining to school. This is not just solely on the superintendent. This is beyond the superintendent, as I mentioned in my testimony.
Understood, Mr. Mendiola.
So I ask, why aren't there other people around the table?
I beg your pardon?
Why aren't there other people around the table like we did when we had a safety roundtable discussing safety with as it pertains to the school? I don't see anybody from GPD. I don't see anybody from the mayor's council or the offices. I mean, this is like it's singled out for the Department of Education. This is singled out for the Department of Education. There are other people and key players that should be around this table. You cannot just isolate this to the Superintendent of Education.
Thank you. Ms. Mendiola, we will ask the question of the superintendent. We'll get some answers, then we'll move on, okay?
Sir.
Let's pause from there.
I will pause. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Madam Vice, do you have any questions? Madam Speaker?
Thank you for being here. I wanted to see, first of all, with the SROs, you said it's becoming too expensive to sustain that program, but I thought the SROs were a federally funded program. So what is the status of that?
So right now, my understanding is it's about $700,000 to the judiciary, and you know, in the past it's been $1 million program to pay for their coordination, their support, and then the SRO salaries and benefits and so forth.
Federal funds, right?
In federal funds, okay. For sure. But again, to supplement what we're already doing in our school system. So when we started this, the notion was to have about at least 2 for every school, and then back with the passage of the Competitive Wage Act, those wages applied across the board. So any employee who on the local side or on the federal side, those salaries and benefits then obviously moved up. So we dedicate a lot of our federal funds to support the curricular and instructional side of the equation, and the SROs we were looking at from the standpoint of cost effectiveness and whether this was the right way to go. And so we tried to maintain that $1 million or less, but even at that, having 6 SROs this year that we're able to support, they're on a rotational basis. So when one of the incidents happens at a school and the SROs are not there, it kind of defeats the purpose for the protective factor that we intended. So we're looking at more cost-effective ways, and we do believe we have assets in the department that we can utilize and maybe build up. So that's, all right, maybe, and again, about whether that's going to be federally or locally funded, we're going to see and try to figure out, of course, a lot of pressure on the local budget, but we'd like to see federal support continue. It's just the goal is no longer to have 2 SROs in every high school. I think we need to look at our middle schools and expand it. So the question is, how do we realistically expand to, we have 8 and 6, right. So 28, let's say 20 to 30 SROs that we want uniformed.
Yes. That would be ideal.
Yes.
But let's get back to the existing SROs. Is it possible to, because my understanding is the judiciary is administrating this SRO program on your behalf, but it's your it's a Department of Education grant. Is
Yes.
that correct? Is it possible to work with the judiciary to restructure it so that more of the money goes into actual SRO positions as opposed to whatever else it's going to right now?
Yeah.
Is that possible? Because that's the money's there.
Right.
Why don't we just get those? And it has decreased from, I think you had at least 2 in every high school, and now you only have 6 total.
Yes.
And so my understanding is now they double up. Now they won't go alone. They double
Right.
up, and so we have schools that have no SROs, and the SROs kind of rotate around, and
Right.
those are huge gaps. But is it possible? Have you tried working with the judiciary, and that's not possible to restructure that program?
So it's possible to restructure the program. We've done this over the past several years. I know when Josh Tenorio was administrator of the courts is when we started, and I know that I think we just came to an understanding that at its best we could get 2 per school, but even at that the cost was going to be significant.
But what cost? I don't understand, because 2 per school, if you're covering it under the program, is no cost to you.
It's a cost to our federal grant.
Right.
Right. So that's a cost.
So where else would that
So what
money...
it means is that we would have to divert funds to support the program.
From where? I mean, what are you concerned about diverting funds from? Why is that a concern? For me, it's either going into admin of the program, like you said, curriculum or something
Right.
else, versus going into the salaries of those SROs and putting them in the schools.
Correct. So it's not just a cost, but there is a cost consideration which really woke us up to the issues because of the Competitive Wage Act. A couple of other issues that we're concerned about is, number one, the retention of our
Right, but those issues, I mean, we can't do anything about the retention.
Right, but if I may, I mean, it even goes beyond that. The other issue that we're facing is within their law enforcement roles as probationary officers, our marshals, and their role in law enforcement. So there's always been a conversation about how we address those gaps in their functions on campus. So I think the idea was, with all that concern, the idea was, do we want to grow the program? And if we grow the program, are we able to address all the other operational issues that are also involved? So, so the decision we've made is we got to find a way to transition, whether it's more of a partnership with the police in some form, because the police have direct arrest powers. There were just gaps. So we could talk more about but they're just operational gaps that we were seeing occur, and it just become an issue of debate between the police and judiciary and us, that we also are trying to figure out how to address. So it's not just a cost issue. But it is driven by a cost issue.
But I'm still, let's just stick with this cost issue.
Sure.
Because it's a federal program, and if you can allocate the federal funds to SRO officers as opposed to anything else it's currently being used, I don't understand why that would be a concern. That should be a benefit to you.
I mean, I don't want to get into weighing all these issues. I mean, I think the issue is, depending on the day of the week, we're asked about whether we've got technology in the classroom, whether we're supporting
Are you saying
outreach
it's
to
the same
parents.
federal funds that's used for...
So this isn't just a grant. Yeah, it's in the consolidated grant. So the consolidated grant goes to a whole list of priorities to support, what we're doing on college readiness, working with GCC to support the CTE programs. It works to support our parent and community outreach.
So this is a different issue. You're talking now that you only want to allocate part of your consolidated grant to SROs versus the part that you've already allocated to SROs is being used by the judiciary for admin versus for SRO positions.
Right. Let me just say that the partnership with the judiciary...
I'm trying to figure out what really is the issue.
Right. So the partnership with the judiciary at this stage, and I understand you're saying whether we can restructure it. And of course, we can always discuss that. I mean, obviously, there's been such a change in leadership as well as in the administrative functions. But right now, we've been working on how we support the cost, the program in its current design. So of course, I think what's happening right now is that we're looking at ways to certainly not to try to eliminate the SR program, but the question is where we're heading next. So I think our school...
I know, but that's okay, let's go there now.
No, but what I want to say is that...
Because now you're talking a totally different program. Not the federally funded SRO program. Now you want to talk about a locally funded SRO program. right?
So
those are different,
that's
those
not
are
a-
apples and oranges in my mind, because
Right.
what I want to know is why you're concerned about the funding of the SRO federally funded program. Okay,
Right.
so I would just recommend, please work with the judiciary, see if they can get more officers to your schools, see if they can, and this issue between, you know, the judiciary, the probation office's role versus DOE's role versus GPD's role, we've heard this before, and I would just say, I don't think GPD's not going to support you in anything you need. So, I mean, we haven't heard that to be the issue. So if that's an issue, please let us know the details of that. But I would think that they also want those SROs in the school, and they will back them up and they will assist them. And that it's not a problem that we have, you know, that their jurisdictions aren't seamless. I just think better to have
Right.
them in than
Right.
to say, you know, let's not deal with them. That's a program that I thought was effective when it was in full force, right? At least we had people in the schools all the time, two people even in every high school at all times.
So
The
if
other thing about the reserve, with the police reserve, yeah, I want to know, because you've talked about that at our roundtable
Right.
also, and so what is the, why is it taking so long? What is the status for real?
I think the issue when we first raised it was trying to find a sufficient number of reserve officers who are willing to put in the hours on campuses, because as you know, the reserve officers also have other.
Have you made a formal request to the
Yes,
police
we've-
department? And
I've-
what if you request it? What do you request of them?
So we've requested
Like a
to,
revolving
Right.
check on your schools, or do you, what are you requesting?
We've requested the opportunity for reserve officers to be able to put in their community hours at the school sites, and we were willing to design a program. So when we talk about costs, what I'm saying is that looking ahead, we want to maintain uniform presence on campus. When we start looking at the possibility of supporting a reserve officer program, the cost effectiveness of that is much clearer. I mean, when you're covering stipends versus full salaries and benefits. So that's why we've been looking in that direction.
Are you saying you would be able to pay that with the same source of funds that you're paying with the SRO?
Once we get the design, that was our intent, to see whether we could just cover the stipends with the federal funds and multiply the numbers.
Okay, now you're making sense
Right.
to me. Now that makes sense. If you're thinking to
Right.
take the SRO funding and put it in another place, like police reserve
Right.
compensation, all right. Now that makes sense to me.
the
But
one more-
otherwise, to me, it should have
Yeah.
been just
sorry.
an addition,
The other
but not a
con-
replacement.
Right. I'm sorry about it. The other context of this is that in the federal grant process, as you know, over the past 2 years, we've been dealing with a change in administration, and every time the president's budget comes down, we're projecting, significant cuts to the budget. So luckily, Congress has withheld the cuts. I mean, it has stayed off those cuts, and we've stayed at the current level. But over the past 2 years, that's been the other driving factor of saying, well, what are we able to grow and expand, knowing that as we go through the grant process, it's only in about April or May when we get our final numbers. But when we get that president's budget introduced, we're normally looking at the possibility of $8 to $10 million in reductions based on his proposal. So that's the other uncertainty that we're dealing with when we make these proposals.
I understand.
Okay.
The other concern I think that you need to think about, what you probably have, but is this SRO officers are specifically trained to deal with students that age, and police officers, I mean, I think you just have to consider that, right? They have a general training, but I think that the courts are doing some specific training also, or the federal, that program is. So anyways, all right. What about this, whose role, you said some of these, the morale is down, and that some of the personnel believe it's not their duty, it's not part of their job description, I think is what you said, not in their job description to intervene in these things. So whose job is it to intervene? Whose job is it to ensure the students are not fighting?
So ultimately, our administrators are charged with the safety on campus, and the personnel there, the adult personnel, are there to be present to hopefully prevent incidents from happening. What happens when there is a fight? We do train and we do provide trainings to our support staff to we provide them training to de-escalate situations, to restrain students and so forth. So a lot of that responsibility does fall to the school aides, but at the same time, again, you are understanding that, especially at the high school when the students are larger and stronger, that even with that training, there's a likelihood that or possibility of someone getting hurt. So even as we do say, school aides are trained and they're ready to intervene, we really are cognizant of the fact that whenever they do that, they do put themselves in harm's way. So it's just part of that. It's not written into their job description, but we do try to provide them some supports to be able to intervene when they're willing to. But again, as you can guess, depending on the size of our employee or the size of the student, it may just present a danger factor that gets involved. That happens when the incident is taking place.
All right. Well, I understand, and I appreciate that teachers in high schools, especially in every school, but in high schools especially, they're always at risk. I think coming to work every day, because you're right that these problems stem from our society. They're coming into the schools, and that they're dealing with them. And I admire the teachers that they deal with this, and the principals. I think they are doing good jobs. I'm glad to see them here. I really want to talk to them. I want to ask them, what is it that they have found effective in their schools, and can we focus on those things more? Because I know that for every school, even the design of the school, helps them or hurts them when it comes to these types of matters. And I wanted to ask you I know there are others, but one more if I could. Okay, is there any impact from teacher absentee on the school safety? Like when you have to call substitutes, do you ever have situations where you've maxed out on the substitutes and there are just classrooms without either a teacher or a substitute? You're calling your support staff in? I mean, how often would you say that situation occurs?
It's more prevalent now, and the issue has been because of our budget situation. And when we've looked at areas where we could try to support the continued teaching and learning, we did forestall the hiring of subs for a quarter, which raised issues at the schools and were reported at the schools, because basically we're looking to cover classes and ensure that most of our kids are continuing to get the lessons and so forth. But at the same time, we're working with the staff that we have on hand. So only this past, I believe it's October 1st, we were able to start bringing on substitutes at a particular level. We'd like to, in our supplemental, we've asked that we fully restore funding for substitutes, because we typically try to budget them at 10% of our total faculty, faculty's their body, but we've been hiring them now at 5% just for the purpose of seeing if we can have some savings there. And teachers have been either covering or each other and supporting each other in that way. But again, we were mostly focused on the teaching and learning and making sure that classroom instruction continued. But again, you're right that it does take away from the overall adult presence on campus. So that's something that I think would be improved once we're able to restore substitutes to the classroom.
Are there incidences in the recent couple of years where these fights are not occurring during lunch, but they're occurring during other times of the school schedule?
I'd have to go back and check. I would say that I'm sure that there are some incidents that do happen. I'm aware of incidents that happen sometimes in school events. Like you said, in passing time, it'll happen. There were some incidents that happened in classrooms, something that we're further looking into at Southern High. As you know, there are a lot of vacant classrooms in certain wings of the schools, and we understand that some of the recent videos, even they weren't this school year or prior years, took place in some of those vacant classrooms. Somehow the kids got in, and so that's something we're working with the school to figure out how we can make sure that doesn't happen. Those were the arranged fights. Those were not, those didn't happen because somebody pushed somebody. Those happened to be let's meet there, and that's what it appeared to be in those. Right.
In those so I'm trying to get a gauge from you whether these are occurring during lunch hour, where there's certain personnel who are kind of monitoring the students, versus happening during other times when these students are supposed to be in classrooms and they're just not, or they're happening during times when they're supposed to be in classrooms and and there are no teachers or substitutes available, so we're kind of assisting by putting them together with, one staff or something like that. If you could tell us the details,
I don't have that details on hand.
And then just some real quick questions. I saw the survey that you passed out. Did you get the results of this, or these are going out today during the parent-teacher conference?
Right. So we did something similar at the end of the school year in 2017, and used that as the latest survey. But given the opportunity that we had, the recent resurfacing of these fight videos, because it was 2015 the last time we saw a big rash of these, and the trouble with the rash of fight videos is they start to proliferate, because I feel that other schools start to put their own videos up and almost in competition. So this year, knowing that we had an opportunity with the parent-teacher conferences, we started with the parents, but it's online. I believe it'll be up for a couple of weeks, and we're asking our schools to push it out.
I see.
But the last time we did the survey, there seems to be overall a feeling that the stakeholders do believe it's safe. But it doesn't mean that these incidents don't occur, right? And so my daughter's in public school too, and I ask her, saying, do you feel safe on campus? And the answer is yes, but it means that she knows where not to hang out and who not to interact with and things like that. So I feel that that's probably the reality of all of our folks on campus, but we'll get that data together, and I'd be happy to share that with the committee.
All right, thank you. Okay, how many would you say students have not been accepted into JP Torres during this, or maybe last school year? Or
I don't have that data in front of me. It's something that we need to formalize more. So what happened was that, as you know, as we initially transitioned, we were getting recommendations from schools for students who would be eligible,
right?
And then they were accepting.
And they have to apply. They're not accepted. That's what I want to know. How many are not accepted?
I think not last year, but the year before is when we started to when the school started to say, can we just interview these students and determine which of them are going to have transportation? I don't have that information. I can ask for that if we have that data on people who've been declined acceptance. Is that what you're asking?
Because you're telling us, the concern is that what are our options with students if we want to take them out of the school because of discipline, right? And JP Torres may be an option, but because of this selection process, several of them are not being accepted there. So I want to know how many of those are.
Okay.
And
so as you know, when we were looking just at eligibility criteria for the students who met the academic kind of failure or being behind, we were looking at a number of about 800 students throughout the school system who could benefit or who would be eligible. Not everyone applied, of course, but I'm saying these would be eligible, and right now we're servicing about 200 at the school. So there is a demand. I would say that that our whole goal with alternative education.
I'm asking,
JP
I would like to see all those statistics, but in particular for today, the ones where they cannot attend any other school. You've decided that, and so how many students are there like that, and how many applied to JP Torres and were not accepted? So there's two gaps. One, they're getting disciplined. They're being told they can't attend any school except maybe JP Torres, and then they're not accepted there either. I just want to know.
Okay, so the number of students who've been expelled, we'll look at the past couple of years, and it'll be a handful. It's not going to be a large number, and then a number of those who may have been declined at JP Torres. So we can figure that part out. But if I could say that right now, just so you're clear, we didn't structure JP Torres as an application school when we first initiated it, but I think that's the direction where we're headed, because we didn't realize. Students, when we opened it, students started to call and say, can we go? And so I think the desire of the students, the faculty and staff there are to...
these selection criteria?
Let me try to provide that for you, but they do
go
through an interview. I think the whole notion of this is to ensure that students have the commitment, have the and have the ability to, But if they're
turning students away because of capacity, I'm curious what the priority is for that school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll focus
and then,
on that.
When the AG, you said you're going to look into how to move forward after the AG's opinion on the hiring freeze.
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
Right. So, the first view I had of this was when the bill that was passed by the legislature was vetoed, and there was a letter there that included the 2012 AG opinion about the
Yes,
inorganic.
that's
So that-
all irrelevant.
right.
We
So
have
that
an
was-
AG opinion.
Right. So that was what
And
that was
after
our
the AG
first.
opinion, I'm just asking, what is the action
Right.
after the AG opinion, and what is holding you up after that?
Right. So once we got the latest AG opinion, the issue is that while we now believe we have the authority based on that opinion to start hiring, that doesn't mean that we can hire all our vacancies now. So what we're looking at is moving forward to hire the school-based positions, but we're also looking at our budgetary situation and trying to work out with the administration what that cash flow is going to look like regularly and so forth.
Okay, so
even
now
though
you're saying the only impediment is your budget,
well, right now, yeah, the only impediment
and I
now
hope
is
you do
is-
the school-based positions first.
Right. No, that's what we had been doing before. So when the freeze, and we had asked that latitude from the legislature and the governor before, so can we just allow us to make decisions on how to hire, knowing that we still have to cut somewhere, and then we can at least prioritize the schools. Because right now, when we
so-
the teachers we could hire, but we couldn't hire school aides. So
Okay, so there's no impediment. It's up to you. It's up to your discretion what you're going to do
subject
right
to
now.
subject to
Yes.
budget limitations.
Of course.
Yes.
Yes, and whether you fill the school-based positions and whether you feel
Correct.
substitute teachers versus school aides versus what you think you need in these schools, right?
Correct. Correct. Subject to our budget at this point.
All right. Then you talked about these school aide positions and that you can't open a school aide 2 position because that might be a promotion for a school aide 1. Why are you not concentrating on school aide 1 positions if that's the need? Is there a need right now for additional
So-
school aides?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is right now we can look across our school staffing patterns and understand what positions are vacant right now. So if there's a vacant school aide 2 position that was vacated, you know, the option that you're presenting to me is either convert that to a school aide 1 position or to hire into that position. And I'm just saying that every time a position opens, all of our school aides know about it. I mean, they know ahead of time who's leaving, who's retiring, and so forth. And so however we open it, I know there's going to be a desire for school aides to take advantage of the promotional opportunity so we can hire into that school aide 2 position. And then when their position comes vacant, hire into that position whoever.
All right.
So
But
that's
when we're talking
the
about
issue.
that the solution to this violence in the schools is additional school aides, then it seems to me that getting more school aides, as many as you can, is the goal, right? And that that there's nothing to prevent you from opening up school aide 1 positions.
Well, I mean, if that's the position that you're taking, I mean, I'm saying that
That's
I'd like to open the positions that are in our staffing pattern that have been vacated, that would also allow for our experienced school aides to apply for those positions and be, you know, to recognize their length of service, and then open that school aide 1 position as we would normally do. Under the current promotion freeze, we would just take all those and convert them into school aide 1 positions. That's a possibility as well. But
But I just want to make sure there's nothing that's stopping you from hiring school aides if you decide to hire school aides under your budget. Right now, there's the hiring freeze has been removed, you said, for all practical purposes. And if you are able under your budget to hire school aides, and there's no other impediment. Is that correct?
So yes, we can hire into our school aide positions.
All right.
All I'm referencing is that there's an equity issue that
I know.
presents itself.
Yes, I
and
understand. And that's across the government that we're
Right.
having that issue. Yes.
And I just wanted to put that on the record because I don't feel as a
understand.
manager that we should ignore that, and that's the only reason I state that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd also like to recognize the presence of Senator Talina Nelson. Ma'am, would you have some questions, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, before I get into it, I do want to acknowledge all the hard work that our teachers and support staff and administrators do at DOE. They really put a lot of effort, extra hours, and many times it's not in accordance with their pay rate. And so I know that the people at DOE, the staff at DOE work their darndest to try to keep the school safe. So I want to thank them. Some of them have been my teachers and even my boss. And so I know that their dedication is true. It takes a different kind of gusto to serve in those positions, especially at the school level. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator.
Now, I heard a conversation about working with the police, and developing the SRO, the judiciary, but I want to point out that perhaps that's not the crux of the matter. No, it's they're children. They're not criminals, and I think that apparently something needs to change because something's not working, and I don't know what it is because I'm not in your foxhole. But what have you done to address the individual needs of every student? Because a lot of these students that are getting into fights through experience as a teacher have a lot of issues at home. And I know it's very hard as a teacher to go to each home, and sometimes we're not even allowed to go to each home to speak with the parents. And so I'm wondering, has there been a consideration to really go and, at your level, framework something to help these students that have these challenges? And I know you don't. It's a shame that we see the fights that happen in our schools, but we don't see the great work that the students do, that the teachers are doing for the students. A lot of teachers and staff, they give up their time. They help these students rather than be with their family. I mean, it's a lot of sacrifice. Even the administrators, you have to be there during the typhoon. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. And so, Mr. Superintendent, I'm not looking to put blame, but my grandmother was also in your seat, and I was one of those rowdy kids. And so really, I think perhaps they need a sense of purpose. Perhaps there needs to be a redirection on how we help these children, because they're not criminals, they're children, right? And no matter how, and they're big these days, they're 10 feet tall. Okay, I'm a little bit exaggerating, but they are huge. And so really, what are we doing to help these children? And what are we doing to better prepare these teachers? Because something's not working within the system. It's not that the teachers are not working. It's not that the staff is not working. Something is not working in the system. So if you don't have, if we don't know the exact answer, what are the efforts that we are doing to get to that point?
Can I say something, Senator? Thank you very much, because I think you hit it right in the head. Earlier in my testimony, I said there's a dislink, because there's a lot of things that go on outside of the campus that eventually finds itself into our campuses. And we've seen that in some of the instances of these violent acts that carry on into the schools. And so as a parent representative on the board, like I mentioned earlier, we've also engaged with the Island Board of Governing Students to have the students also from their perspective as to how can we solve some of how they can provide ideas on how we can address some of these issues. And it's pretty interesting from their perspective in terms of like providing that additional counseling and providing that additional support, peer support. And this is the type of dialogue that we can continue. I know that Senator Will Castro, we had this dialogue during that roundtable regarding, filling the gaps when it comes to parent involvement. Right now we have PTOs, and those are the kids that get the support from their parents that will take the time to go out. But we're also missing those parents that unfortunately sometimes don't show up. And frankly speaking, it's a societal issue. We got kids that come on campus that are inebriated, they're drunk. Where are they getting the alcohol? Where are they getting these types of, and these are the questions that we need to ask. When they come into our campuses inebriated and they create problems, You know, what administrative remedies does we empower the superintendent to exercise? But it goes beyond that. So through this oversight hearing calling, we were able to, you know, the mayor, we're engaging with him as well. And, you know, if we need to strengthen our policies within the department, and this is the types of conversation that we definitely need to have. I would like to figure out, maybe we have to call a parent congress and maybe get parents from the different schools to come together and really take control of what's going on in their communities, because like you said, most of the time we're shelter providers, we're public health, we're counselors. When they enter the gate, the school basically acts as everything. But once they're outside of the gate, and then we see these videos of them fighting outside with their school uniforms, you know, and they're recording it and they're passing it along. So I do appreciate that understanding that you have regarding, you know, this is everybody, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to try anything. And I know that I'm here today just to basically say we're going to provide as much support from the board level to the superintendent, and we're going to try and come up with sound policies that's going to include all the stakeholders, so that if there's any gaps that we identify, we definitely would fill those gaps.
If I could add, you mentioned the police, and I wanted to, I know you came in a little bit after I started my presentation, but it's not just the police. That we mentioned that with regard to the SRO programs on law enforcement on campus, but we did say we need the mayors, we need the other agencies, behavioral health, DYA, the judiciary, all of those. We all are partners right now, but we need to strengthen that partnership. I think my administrators and staff, maybe to a point, maybe to a fault, will know or will see my approach over the past few years as almost bleeding heart. They will push back sometimes in terms of the interventions that we ask them to do before we take severe consequences on students, because we do know their children. Of course, when they get to high school, they sometimes are adults. And so even as we report things, especially at high school, the police do already report to campus, and they take allegations of assault. DYA is involved when those serious crimes happen. So I guess what I'm saying is this is, by taking a hard stand in certain cases and certain behaviors, it's not meant to say that we're not willing to support the child and the student or that adult student. We just need to figure out how best to balance those issues of the right to educate and our hopes that they will graduate with the right to have a safe campus. So if I could give just a real brief example, when the last Typhoon Mangkhut hit and there was a Tier 2 shelter open at Estumbo, we were there every day to support the students, and every day to make sure they got on a bus, got to school, work out all the issues. It turns out that one family met the family of a boy that I expelled the year before. And it was the right decision in my estimation at the same time. But at the same time, we understood that the issue was also living in a house with no power, no water, an abandoned house, feeding at the homeless feedings, washing dishes at the skate park. I mean, living in a situation where I spoke with my deputy. They said, we expect these kids to perform, to do their homework, to behave and all this, but recognizing that when they go home, I mean, this is what their challenge. And I would just say that we can't solve every issue. We try, and we did, and we worked with that family to support the kids, but housing was the issue. Having stable housing so that you can have a stable job, get out there and find an opportunity to work. And, you know, so it really is a complicated issue, but when it comes to violence, I guess the issue is, let's have that hard discussion. When do we work with our students to try to change behavior, and when are the acts of violence too much to condone and accept on campus? And I feel that at some point we have to draw the line. It doesn't mean draw the line and abandon the student, but like I said, there are a couple instances where I expelled kids and said, but I want you to apply to JP Torres. They will accept your application, they will interview you, you will have to demonstrate a commitment that you want to finish, and you're willing to put in the work that's needed and the sacrifice that's needed. So I think looking at I'm looking at expulsion as an opportunity, but looking at the options afterwards and making sure we don't just let them go is the framework that I would like to see us strengthen. I don't have all that designed yet, but I think that might be the case. Draw the line somewhere, and then if you cross that line, there are different ways that you can still finish, whether it's through GCC, through JP Torres, as Mujao, other opportunities that you can still finish with the graduation.
Okay, thank you. But So, because of my military nature, is there a timeline and perhaps sending some of the people that you are going to designate to help find these solutions to areas nationally to see firsthand an example of perhaps a success model? Is there a timeline? And
Well, so right now, today, Joe Sanchez is out at the Alternative Education Conference. What we had discussed before and after he comes back is that we're trying to build around our experience at JP Torres to provide not a JP Torres model everywhere, but to provide a broader alternative learning format so that students who are either accelerating or having difficulty succeeding in school have other ways to continue their education. And so that is a directive to him that we need to develop that strategy, because we've been talking about it for a few years. And I think because of the resource environment, thinking about expanding JP Torres has not been a possibility just because of the cost. But now we've done training on online learning. We're opening up a contract soon to have other alternative education options available for students. And it's just a matter of taking these initiatives and building them into a strategy that's more cohesive and coherent. So I think we can have that follow-up discussion, but I asked him to take the lead in designing a broader alternative learning strategy, because in cases like this, when a student, compulsory age student, right, the 17-year-old might be doing things that are not acceptable on a mainstream campus, but we ought to think about, we don't want that student to just end up without a diploma out there and continuing on the wrong path. It's just a matter of balancing whether that happens on a main campus or somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we'll be having a follow-up discussion, right, to make sure we're on track?
Right.
Okay.
So he's at a conference right now in Ohio in the cold winter, so I'm sure he's focused. But I did ask him, I said, take a look at the broader set of resources and experts there and see if we can take advantage of their expertise to build a broader strategy, and not just conversion of a credit, JP Torres into credit recovery. That's not what alternative education means. It means multiple ways to learn.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to follow up on the chairman's comments, but I really wanted to take us back to January of 2017. There was an incident in a middle school, an incident of public drunkenness and weapons that were brought on campus. And in our reaction, we made the attempt to visit the campus. And I got to say, since then, there hasn't been a reported repeat case. But even upon that initial instance, the discussion that we started, as the chairman said very clearly, was the need to involve the parents. And just to be clear, for those who are not aware, I'm a teacher, and so is Senator Nelson, so are educators. But I can give you a very vivid example of what happened in one experience at a middle school when I was teaching in the 7th grade. And I have to kind of set the context, because it really speaks to my adamant position that something needs to be done about parenting. So at that school, and yes, they are quite large. I don't know, it's notwithstanding the fact that I'm 5'4", 100 nothing, but this child, right, was a big kid. And I directed the kid to get off from the walkway cover and not retrieve the football. And he looked at me in defiance, got up anyway, came down, and I went up to the child and I asked him, "Don't do that again." And this child, in his own volition, decided to confront me. And thank God there was another teacher there that was able to mitigate what was an escalating situation. I've never experienced that from a kid, especially my own children. And I demanded, and the vice principal at the time was there. I demanded, he's in the room, I demanded to see the parent. And they called the parent, and I sat down despite the fact that I had to teach a class, because I've never dealt with that situation as a professional. And I was shocked that the parent the parent himself, admittedly, in a closed door room discussion, said that he was afraid to discipline his child out of concern that he may go to jail. And I pleaded to him as a father. Eyes were red, shaking at the time. I was extremely upset. And then I was extremely hurt for the family. And I pleaded for him to seek the necessary support, because if a male individual had done that to another male individual in a bar setting, it could have escalated and someone could have gotten hurt, some could have died. And for this kid's sake, as he's growing up, there has to be some better mechanism. And I guess my point would be, Mr. Chairman, and now that you're here to facilitate, so I wasn't quite sure how to facilitate and then give my commentary. My point would be, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Mendiola, is I'd like to pick up where we left off. I'm not clear on what the legal framework is for holding parents accountable. And so my rhetorical question, we don't have to get into this. My question for the department to answer when we sit down again in a more constructive environment on this one issue is, what can we do to engage the parents? I know parental support and counseling and guidance, that's such an important component, especially with dealing with people of diverse ethnic backgrounds who are coming into this system. I get it. But my conservative nature, see, I won't settle just for that, because my conservative nature tells me that if there's someone under your ward, your legal guardianship, and this individual destroys property or is an immediate threat to human life and safety, that you bear that responsibility. My children have been involved in situations at schools. And make no mistake about it, I went down and took my son home, and I dealt with him in a legal fashion that's consistent with my principles. And he never repeated it. And that's not to say that's the model system. That's just how I handle my family. And so my question that I want to work with you on is, what can the department do, or we can, as members of the professional community of educators and as policymakers and everybody in between, do to support, to build up the family? But at the same time, please help me understand what the professionals can recommend, because I'm weak in this area, to hold parents accountable. To hold parents accountable who are permissive and allow persistent repeat behavior. Now, I know, Mr. Chairman, forgive me, this is not a popular position. I'm sure parents out there who have their own preferred way of dealing with their children are going to react, probably not in a very positive way, to my position. But I'm adamant that someone has to take legal responsibility. You spray paint, you get in there and you cover that up. You don't have the money, then you better find the time, or the court or somebody with your help can help us do that. Maybe there is already a mechanism to do that. But that's my plea to the department. And I want to commend the principal and the other professionals in the room who were shocked that we showed up that one day. And it wasn't to get any kind of FaceTime with the media. It was to sit down and try to better understand what we can do. And I commend you for your mitigation strategy and there being no repeat behavior in that one middle school in a very highly populated area, by the way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, Senator, I mean, you hit the crux of the matter. I mean, I think the issue, though, of course, is when you get into high school at that stage, right? Some of the most worthwhile conversations I've had with parents are at that expulsion table when they're appealing. And it's too late at that point. And we sit there and we talk about, what about my child? And I say, I want your child to succeed. So in some cases, if they present enough convincing argument, I will, reverse it, or, we can do that. But if it's too egregious, I mean, there was one instance in when one of my administrators had to go to the hospital, to the ER because of an incident, and I can't tolerate that at the school level, that a student, no matter what the mitigant, is going to harm an administrator in front of everybody and put her in the hospital. That's not tolerable. I can't tolerate that. So I had that conversation, and we said, okay, look, this is what's going to happen. He's not returning. Now, what are we going to do about that? What are the options? Are you going to reapply next year? Do you want to go interview at JP Torres? Should I connect you to GCC? Let's talk about the issue that you need to address now. The problem is that's too late for those kinds of conversations. So we know that it has to happen earlier. The challenge, as you know, both as teachers, if you're an elementary school teacher, you see the parents all the time, most of the parents, and they're always there, all the celebrations. But middle school becomes tougher, not because partly because your children are saying, well, I'm doing okay, don't ask any more questions about what's happening in middle school. But at that point, parents tend to, let this child have more independence and not pay as much attention. But it's that critical time in middle school, I think, where we do want progressive discipline to work, not automatic expulsions, right? We're talking about high school when they get to that point, when you're near adulthood, but in middle school, it's really important. I can only say that we have to work on that and build a culture of engagement with our parents. The problem is the size of our schools, the size of our school communities. It's hard to manage. So some of the discussion we've been having is, and again, thinking about how we do this without any additional resources is hard, but the real way to deal with this is to see if we can identify risk factors for students that have demonstrated, the potential to continue on a path in the wrong direction. And it's almost as if you need to do case management, right? You got to get down with the family before they get into an incident, before they get into a violent act, and say, look, what's going on at home? How can we support your child? What are the issues? But it's really about building relationships. So this family that we dealt with at the shelter I was telling you about, the comment she made to us, our school folks, was that you guys are the only ones who talk to us respectfully. When you hear that, you wonder what else has this family been hearing as they've tried to navigate their way throughout government to get the resources they need. But part of it's respect, part of it's building relationships, and it's hard to do that across the board, right? And when you have so many students and families, but if you had the resources and the ability, you would want to case manage that minority of students in middle school that might end up being negative on the campus, or you could turn them around to be positive. The problem is it takes more time investment, and I'm sure partners. So, we have Nadine Cepeda, our school psychologist leading our school-based behavioral health. I always ask her, what are you seeing out there? First of all, she says, the caseloads are huge. The number of students that our schools are asking, can you please come and do an assessment? The numbers are just huge. But when they go in, they do see these diagnoses. They are diagnosing students who are previously undiagnosed with certain needs that need to be met. So we're dealing with not just bad behavior, but there might be other things going on, depression being one of them, and we could have a whole hearing on this, depression being one of them, that contributes to a whole host of other issues. So we can't deal with everybody, but maybe, if we look and we talk, have that internal conversation or partnership with you, it's being able to, even as we draw hard lines about what's unacceptable at campus, think about proactively identifying, students with those risk factors that we want to stay on top of. We can't ignore, but the only challenge is hard to do it alone. So that's when you're going to need to make sure the parents are engaged, make sure we have other partners who can help keep kids on track when they're not in school, and so forth. So that's what I would say would be the ideal. And some of our schools try to do that, but again, doing it within our existing staff, existing resources.
Do you have a follow-up, Madam Speaker?
Just one more. I want to acknowledge all the principals here and the other staff, and I want also to say that my understanding or my perception of your schools is that you run them very, very well. That the discipline is actually top notch. I've even when my students were there, I think this principal was in charge of it. But in they're very difficult situations, right? And so for the most part, almost every day, you are success stories. You are successfully keeping, your schools very safe. And so I think that the things we're seeing on social media, they're the exception. Yes. But so we're kind of, having this hearing based on these exceptions and not your everyday work, which I know is tough, and I think you're putting everything you've got into it. But I just kind of, since you're here, wanted to ask if there's any equipment or even policy that you think or you have requested be implemented in your school, in particular that would help your school in particular, because sometimes I think these are case specific. I want to know if those have been addressed, and if they haven't, if you could share it with us. If it's a cost factor, yeah, share those with us, and or your successes also, that if you think what you're doing in your school should be implemented across the board because you find it so successful, I'm sure you're sharing that with the superintendent. But yes, I would just like to hear about it also, because we want to keep abreast of your successes also, which I think are really significant considering the amount of students you have and how times have changed and the amount of things you have to deal with now, and the kind of creativity of the students also, coming in. So I know you're dealing with a lot, and you're changing every year. You have to change your policy a little bit to deal with the other ways they've thought of bringing different things in or dealing with those kinds of things. So I would just like to know if there's any outstanding requests that you have had for your school, either equipment or policy, if you could share those with us.
Okay, so as we said, we sat down with our administrators and with the board, and let me couple of things, right? Obviously, we always talk about school support and other. I mean, that's really when I hear about it 10 years, 15 years ago, people say that the school aids were at this number and now we're at this number. So that's always going to be a constant. One of the key things, though, is that progressive discipline issue that we talked about. We're going to have to figure out how to address that balancing act. So the administrators, when we met with them, said, we need to hear that guidance from from myself and from the board, because they are really diligent about the progressive discipline. So even in this act that you see on video, they're going to go back and say, well, what was this kid's disciplinary history? Was he showing trouble? It's the first time he got an offense. I'm saying that was a pretty violent act. We need to figure out whether you need to go back and establish all of this years of history, or whether that was sufficient to take action. So I'm telling them that they need some guidance from me as to how to approach that, but do the policy work around that. But I'd be happy to report back, or you're welcome to attend our work session when we set that policy, because that's the discussion we're having. It's what can we do inside the schools, and what do you need, recognizing that our administrators and teachers and staff are dealing with it, immediately at the front line.
All right. Well, I understand that, you're speaking for all of them, but I guess as a senator, I'm a little bit, sometimes I feel like there are some certain issues in schools that I think I want to hear directly from the principals, because they're the ones in those situations. So I'm just welcoming you to submit anything if you'd like to just let us know for your school. I'd also like to know for the school-based behavioral health. I think I'm very happy that you're there, that you're implementing it the way you are, and congratulations on that. That's a huge step, and I think this ID, but also that if you could just share with us so far what your experiences have been, what are we looking at, and give us kind of an update would really help, I think, so that we know. We're no longer looking at these old issues. This is what's going on in our schools now in terms of behavioral health, like depression. That kind of surprised me, I guess, maybe, but that type of thing. Just keep us posted, I think, so that we can all move along together in understanding what you're doing there.
I mean, we'd be happy and working with the committee to give you updates on any aspect of what was happening in the school system. For sure. So obviously all of our administrators, all of our employees are welcome to email you or provide their comments in their personal capacity. I just, at this hearing as the official spokesperson for the agency, we've already met together in the board. And I think a lot of that work's going to be with the board policy work too, because that's where we're really going to solidify in longstanding policy in a public, transparent manner, where they're subject to their vote, about where that line gets drawn in balancing how we're approaching discipline. So I think through that public process, we'll be able to gather that and provide that to you at our next hearing.
So were any of you who are here, did you want to say anything? Or
Ma'am,
just
can I ask for
support?
respect just respectfully that...
Are they just here in support of you?
Well, not just that. I mean, as with any agency, I think you look to the director to represent the department. They are entitled to take leave and come to in their personal capacity. I just asked the respect to be able to represent the department at this hearing. I've worked with my administrators and the board.
I have no objection to that. I'm just asking.
No, I'm just saying that I don't have an objection to them sharing their opinion, but I just, every time I come to a hearing, there's always that invitation. I'm just saying that I came here to officially represent the department. So it seems as if I'm asking your staff to give me the senator's positions on things.
All right,
I prefer to handle this to our formal protocol.
So we're invited by you here to support
Well, I
you.
wanted them to hear directly from you what some of the concerns and issues you had, and to be on here on their behalf to share, what they shared with us. Partly because what happens at their school, like you said, from this, I hope that they will take this, and when we work with the board, who's going to set the policies, to make the recommendations, like you said, these are things that we like shared that should be done at the policy level. And then when there's legislative change need, the board takes that lead to recommend legislative changes through board resolution. So I think we want to allow that process to work as we've already started.
Okay. Senator Nelson, you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, gosh, Superintendent, that seems like you're trying to suppress people that are concerned within the faculty and staff to speak.
Absolutely not.
Okay, because
They're welcome to, and I'm sure
you jumped really quick after the speaker asked for that. But
I just
but that's
want to
not,
maintain that proper protocol. It feels as if that by ignoring the fact that you've invited me here to represent the department, that now you're asking for other opinions, which is fine. I just think that should be in the proper setting.
No one is ignoring the fact that we invited you here, but this is an open forum for discussion, and everyone in our community are stakeholders. So
Absolutely.
I'm thinking that's probably why she asked the question, to get
No,
firsthand experience.
I understand.
Because as we know that when something is said, 10 people down the line, it completely changes. They do that practice all the time in certain trainings. But that's not what I wanted to address. So we will have another discussion about some of the changes or solutions that you have to address the violence in our schools. But I'm also asking if perhaps you could look at incentive programs for the teachers and the staff. I know that there are several, and I'll just give you something perhaps very fundamental, but in the past, I don't know if this program is still in place, but they allowed aides time to go get a college education and become teachers to transition. And so I don't know if I heard correctly, if morale is down in DOE, but I understand we're in a fiscal crisis, and I understand that we're short in funding, but I'm sure that there's some other solutions. There's always a way. My grandmother always told me, no is never an answer. There's always
Right.
a way. And so I was wondering, perhaps you can also create some additional incentive programs for the teachers and the support staff, and perhaps even the administrators, right, to help them also grow individually and progress within their career. When I was a teacher, some of the support staff and aides felt that their job position just kept them stagnant in a certain degree, and it affected their performance. And so if you could look into that and see what we can do to help them. This Common Core curriculum requires them to do much, much more work. I never agreed with Common Core as a teacher. I felt that I feel that now we are stretching our teachers very thin, and we're not acknowledging their work or compensating them enough. And the answer is always because we don't have enough money.
Correct.
And so perhaps there's another solution to show them how grateful we are for their sacrifice in teaching our children. So if you could work on something, perhaps in our next meeting.
One thing you should know is that we, obviously with our teacher shortage,
yes, I understand
it's really
that
a
too.
significant issue. So, we are continuing to work, and this is we're using federal, our consolidated grant to see how we can try to remove some of the roadblocks for our aspiring teachers, our limited term teachers, those who are already teaching, but they've got a college degree, but they don't have the certification. So we are using our federal grant to try to provide incentives to take and pass the praxis and to work with DOG on that coursework to get certified. And I think the same thing would apply if we were to do that for other teachers and aides and positions or so forth.
Yes.
And then you certainly, you know them personally, I guess, myself is the same thing. When you talk to school aides, there's some school aides who've been in place like, maybe 15, 16 years. And that's why this promotion thing kind of stings because, especially before the freeze, when they know that somebody retired, they say, well, can we, I know that 2 position is opening. and I've been here so long, and I'd like to apply, and so, if I were to convert that to a school aid one, and you have these, employees who are waiting, they just wait for those rare opportunities to promote. That's a challenge. So that's something that the board, I've talked to the board, I said, it's kind of a strange system that we're running, where we're waiting for.
Maybe you need to revamp your system.
Yeah, for the school aides, because how is it that and then the way it works is if a school aid 3 position opens up at an elementary school, just because that's where it happened to be, and you have a school aid 1 who was really doing well at a high school, and they apply for that position, but you really don't want them at an elementary school if they've shown success at the high school. So I've talked to the board, this year we've really been getting a lot of that, especially in light of the budget challenges, reminding me, we've been here for so long, and it's just hard to move up, and can you help us? I raised that with our chair and our vice chair. So hopefully, and stay on the top of that with us. We're happy to see if we need to change that system for those employees.
I think you do. I think you do need to change the system. It's just, what are we going to change it to? That's the challenge.
Right, and how we manage that, yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Senator. Mr. Superintendent, I forgot to let you introduce everybody that's here today.
Absolutely.
If you could, please.
It's a test. Well, let me go ahead and recognize our other board members. First, we have our Vice Chair, Maria Gutierrez, and our board member, Lou Beneventi, here with us today. I don't see any other board members. And then we invited the secondary and high school administrators to attend, either the administrator or the assistant who might be in charge of discipline, so we could have this discussion and they could hear exactly what the range of issues and recommendations were. So we have Robert Martinez, who was a principal of FB Leon Guerrero. We have Dr. Bobby Adamas, who is principal of John F. Kennedy High School, right here. Carlos Mesnayan, principal of the Simon Sanchez High School. Marianne Lujan, who is our acting principal at Jose Rios Middle School. We have Erica Cruz, who is administrator at Untitled Middle School. Now, can I just take a break to say that she was recognized Merit Cup of Excellence Top Manager of the Year?
Congratulations.
We have, I forget which queen we're talking about. Oh, wait, so this is Yolinda Hernandez Sevilla from George Washington High School, principal. Of course, sorry, I failed to mention Taling Taichno, Deputy for Finance and Administrative Services. She's the one tallying up all the numbers as we talk. So let me introduce Deputy Superintendent Kelly Sokola for Educational Support and Community Learning, as well as Deputy Superintendent Stacy Sahagan for Deputy of Assessment and Accountability. Behind Dr. Sokola is Patrick Egubai, who is Principal of Beneventi Middle School. We have Sophie Duenas, who is the principal of Teton High School. Anderson Joseph, who is a assistant principal. Where are you now, Anderson? Beneventi? Estumbo. Okay, you moved a couple of times. So Estumbo Middle School. Dwayne Matanonia, who is the principal of Ocean View Middle School. And then Begonia Flores, who is principal of Okudu High School. And then we have Nadine Cepeda, who is our district psychologist and is basically the clinical director for our school-based health initiative. And I believe those are all of the DOE employees who are here today.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. I want to we're going to wrap this up real quick. Number one, the only reason why I called oversight is we've been communicating, and for most of the staff here.
Through video.
Through all kinds of technology. Now, the biggest issue that concerned the people of Guam is what's going on. That's all the oversight was all about. You answered everything, Mr. Fernandez. I'm only concerned now is, and I know for a fact that every principal in DOE, you guys work very, very hard. I have no doubt about that. And that's something that I don't envy you. I just wish you the best. And if we had the means to give you the funding you needed, you would have gotten it. Mr. Chairman mentioned it. I was on the board and I was the chairman. And I've always said, keep asking for money. I'm on this side of the street and I'm trying to find a way. We have a teacher, we have a lawyer. We're trying to find a way, but you know, folks, you need to understand that number one, the government is only so big and you take the biggest chunk, and if we can find money for DOE, you'll get it. If we can maybe stop the executive branch from, what's that, freezing 15% of your money, maybe you'll be a little bit more decent, be able to work it through. Then we can find other federal grants and other means of providing support. And I know Nadine would love to see some money come from the health teacher funds so you can help the behavioral program. And we've talked about that before. But there's only so much money. I mean, I remember when I was on the board, we convinced civil service to do the reevaluation of teachers so they can get their pay raise. They jumped from 45 to number 23 on the national average. I'm hoping Mr. Chairman will take that lead and pull up that old law and ask civil service to do another reevaluation so that we don't have to say the teachers need more pay. Mr. Cost don't have to always be fighting with everybody. I know Robert, he's good. But there are many things that the people of Guam don't know what's going on. They see it, it's viral, it's ridiculous. In the past, the Department of Education never had a PIO. You do now, Mr. Fernandez. There should be, every time there's a bad viral, there should be 10 times success. There are more success stories than the fights. I know that. I like to look at my WhatsApp and see you, John, saying, check this out. This is what's happening. Not me sent to you. And, John, Mark, and Maria, I sent you, what's going on? You remember my letter was dated October 12th. We need to sit down. October 29th, I get a response. John, all I'm asking is when the senators ask for info, por favor, come to the office or ask us to come to your office and let's talk. Because as the media and everybody comes to us and say, what are you doing? No different than what you said. We should have the mayors. I wish the mayor's council would send you a good rep. He's my mayor, Rudy. That's your rep. But he doesn't represent every village. Maybe the mayors need to change their rep. And maybe Angel Sablon should be attending your board meeting because he represents all 19 villages. And there's many issues there. I was going to talk about, you got your survey. Is it being sent out to the community? Maybe put it out on the media. Get an interview, Kim says, this is the survey. This is where we're going. This is where we want to go. You mentioned it before we started oversight. You came to me and said, I'm going to get harsh. Por favor, you're the superintendent. Get harsh. If the kids don't want to listen, the parents don't want to come, call GPD, call DYA. Do what you need to do because one day it'll be, you don't want our own kids to be victims. And we don't want to wait for the next victim. Okay? That's what the oversight is about. It's for you, the superintendent, not the board, to be aggressive against the legislature, but the superintendent to report. The school is safe. This is what's happening. Send the message to the media. Those are old videos. Those are not current. Just keep sending it out. You need to drown the bad things they keep trying to promote about DOE. DOE is working very hard, and I'm hoping Simon Sanchez's bid will come out soon. So Ms. Nayan, don't keep looking at me and asking me with the vice principal, Mr. Finona, saying, ask fun. John, you guys have a lot of work in front of you. Exactly what the speaker brought up. You need to do policies, do it. Yeah, if it's Senator Nelson said, if it's a 9% raise, let us know, okay, when it's the teachers. But my concern is... It is 9%. Oh, 9% rate. Oh, you're getting 9%? Maybe you need to share it with the principals. I'm just kidding. But whatever needs to happen, okay, she's talking about, I guess you got a raise coming. Oh, it's in his contract. Oh, you're, okay, good. But, the last roundtable we had, we talked about Department of Education's booklet, compilation of schools, discipline laws and regulations. It's all about DOE. Take advantage of it. The US DOE sees what you're supposed to do. DYA has their own school program. Send the kid to DYA. Don't send them to JP Torres. Those are high risk. Kids that are trouble, they're high risk to the community. DYA should handle them, not you. Okay, and that's my recommendation. But unless anybody has anything else to say, this will conclude this oversight hearing. Mr. Fernandez, please keep us informed. The legislature, when something comes out, Taling, you got my number, and so does John. Please keep us informed. Okay? If there's any other testimony, and please provide us the information that the senators are asking for. They really want that. We want to help you, but we can't help you if you don't help us help you. Okay? That being said, if you have anything else you want to submit to us, to my committee, address it to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation. Submit it via email to Senator Joe S. and Agustin at gmail.com. My office is located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tumuning, Guam, 9691. Sidzus Masi for your attendance and participating in today's oversight hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. Have a nice day.